Have you ever wanted to change something about your life and wondered why you couldn't? You may have wanted to lose weight, improve the quality and depth of your relationship, shift upward financially and have financial freedom and security. Some of you may have noticed some forward movement towards those things, but ended up pulling back, while others got excited, but never really followed through or even really got started. Why is it that you didn't start? Or if you did, why did you follow through? What is it that controls every thought, every feeling, every emotion, every action you make or you don't make in your life? What is it that determines what you spend your money on today? What clothes you wear, what you'll talk about, both internally, to yourself and to others whom you're going to see throughout the day? What is it that determines every action you're going to make? Not only in the next few minutes, but for your entire day, your entire life. All these things are determined and controlled by our values and our beliefs about ourselves and the world. Those two things will determine how you act upon the world and how you react to the world. They'll determine what you'll see and what you'll actually filter out and won't even notice. In other words, they determine how you perceive your reality. Let me define values here. I'm not talking about values or morals, like honesty, integrity, persistence, and so on. When I say values in this context, I'm talking about what's most valuable to you in your life, what's second most valuable, third most, and so on. In other words, what do you value or what's most important to you? After what's most important, what's second most important to you? What's third most and fourth most, and so on. See, for example, if you believe you're big boned, you're not going to go for it when you're going to try to lose weight. Because in the back of your mind, your belief is that you're big boned and you're just going to pile it back on anyway. So, I'll always be this way. What's the use? Then obviously you're not going to go for it. You're not going to try to lose weight. You're not going to push yourself to that next level, whether it be in your career or your business and your finances, your relationship, or anything else. So our beliefs and our values control our behaviors and our action. And because both of these are subconscious, we're not even aware that we're being controlled by them. Consciously, you may go for a goal, but subconsciously, those two culprits are holding you back from that. So a lot of the time, there's a conflict between what you consciously and unconsciously, the programming, your thoughts and your actions. And that's where the real challenge is. When we have conflict between what we want and, what we think we want, and then you have this other belief inside you that this bloody stuff never really works long term anyway. Those two conflicts is what's going to keep people from using all their energy on a consistent basis. It's kind of like taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. It's like if you want to get ahead financially, but you have this subconscious, or you may even be conscious, that wealthy people are greedy, they don't have real friends, or can you see how these are conflicting directions? There are conflict patterns of behavior. So anyone who succeeds in any situation has a pattern for succeeding and they have a pattern for failing. It doesn't matter if the person is doing it in business, in relationships, or health. In fact, it doesn't matter what the environment is. The law of success is the same regardless of who you are. First of all, as I said on other videos, you have to know your outcome or your end result. You have to know what it is that you want. If you don't have a target, what are you aiming at? And this is as basic as it sounds. Most people don't really know what they want. They may have a rough idea, but they're not specific enough. If you know your outcome, the chances of success are amplified without a doubt. So this is going to be a question you need to ask yourself. What's my outcome? What do I want to achieve? Your outcome will determine what you do, not the other way around. Are you with me? So first of all, say your outcome. Then you begin to decide what you need to do in order to get that outcome. For example, how many of you ever been in an argument and you forgot what you're arguing about, but you knew you had to win? How many have been there? Okay. Now, what if in the middle of that argument you stopped and you asked yourself the question, what's my outcome here? Is it just to win this argument, or is it to connect and maybe influence this person? I guarantee your brain would say, my outcome's not to fight. My outcome is to resolve this and connect. So if you get clear on what your real target is, your behavior will change automatically. If you get clear and become present, your intention will give you a different outcome. Remember, clarity is power, and the point of power is in the present. That is, if you're present. The more clear you can be about what you really want, the more power you're going to have. This clarity is like a homing device to your goal. A missile is clear and it's locked in on its target. If the target moves, as it often does, then the retro rocket's initiated by the missile's computer and guided towards its goal. Except in this case, the computer is your brain, and the retro rockets are the decisions you make and the actions you take. Once you're clear about your outcome, your brain kicks in and the reticular activating system gets into gear and hones in on the target or your goal. Let me explain how the reticular activating system works. I was on holidays on the Gold Coast and I went to hire a car to get around. The car was nice, but it was a lime green color. It stood out like you know what. I never saw a car that color before in my life. My partner and I had a chuckle about how it stood out because of its fluorescent lime color. I kid you not. On the way to the hotel from the airport, a mere 45 minutes drive, we noticed 3 other cars exactly the same color. That weekend, we saw so many, we lost count. Has that ever happened to you? I'm sure it has. Your reticular activating system filters out the things in your awareness only if they're either of value or if they're a threat. Otherwise, you'd have sensory information overload. Let me explain. Have you ever walked down a busy street with someone deep in conversation, oblivious to all the traffic sounds? If you were to decide to cross the road, all of a sudden your reticular activating system kicks in and now you notice the sounds of oncoming cars, the screeching of the brakes. In fact, you'll notice anything that could be dangerous to you walking safely across the road. Where were those sounds and smells and so on before that, in the traffic, before you decided to cross? They're always there, but your RAS filtered them out until you made a decision to cross the road. So your RAS will only allow things of value or things of threat into your awareness. They're always there, but until you make a decision and know what you want, it'll filter anything out relating, to those conditions and your awareness. So when you say, this is my intention, this is what I really want, then anything that relates to that, you'll notice, and it'll start popping up in front of your focus all the time. A lot of times people say, it's amazing, I decided this, and this kind of synchronicity, all these things started popping up. Well, these things are always around you. But before that, you never notice them because you haven't decided on your outcome. So firstly, know exactly what you want. Then give yourself enough reasons so you can get a big enough why. Then you figure out how to do those things, what you can do about them. But you've got to have the purpose, and the purpose provides the drive. Now, if you know what you want and you know why, you're light years ahead of the people out there, honestly. Now, you've got to do is what most people won't do, and that's take massive action daily towards your goal. Massive action can be the cure-all. When you know what you're after and you know why you want it, that's it. Because when you know that and you take massive action, you won't just be expending energy. You'll be moving yourself in a direction towards something you really, really want. So what usually stops people from taking action? It's fear. What do you think is the number one fear most people have? It's fear of failure. Because they feel if they fail, they won't be loved. They'll be rejected. They'll be hurt. They'll be judged. They'll be ridiculed. So in their minds, what they really are afraid of is maybe losing the love and respect of, if they fail from people that they are close to. Now, no one, wants not to be loved, especially by those close around us. The reality is you can't fail unless you don't try. And if that doesn't work, learn from it and try something better next time you go about doing it. And if you get caught up and try again, you're already in the top percentage of people who try. A lot of people fail after their first attempt, their second attempt. If that course of action didn't work, try another different course. But don't be stubborn for the sake of it. A different strategy may be needed. Don't drive to the west expecting a sunrise, and similarly, don't face the east expecting a sunset. You have to have, sensitivity to the results around you, whether it be good or bad, and just adjust your strategy accordingly. Your old patterns keep you locked into a certain type of behavior unless you become conscious of them and modify them accordingly. Do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That's called stupidity. You can't do the same thing again and again and expect different results. It doesn't happen. But we get caught up in our patterns. So we wanted, we will realize that when it happens and get some sort of sensory acuity, whether it's working or not. This is where emotional intelligence comes into play. Many years ago, I learned from Robert Kiyosaki, if I wanted to be great at something, I needed to have finer and finer distinctions about that particular field or area that I wanted to be successful at. For example, I used to go skiing once or twice a year. I was an average skier, and because I was average, I only had a few words for the word snow. There's the word snow, of course. There's powder, there's sleet, and maybe ice. That's it. Eskimos, on the other hand, have to live on the snow every day. So do you think they'd have finer distinction for the word snow? You would, wouldn't you? Eskimos have 50 words that describe snow. Google it. Why do you think they have so many words? It's because they live there. They need finer and greater distinctions. There's a type of snow that you can make igloos from. The type of snow that you can cut a hole in and fish. The type that you can't. do that because, you know, the ice is too thin and your body weight will fall into the ice. You have to be careful not to eat the yellow snow. So distinctions lead to clarity. And as I said before, clarity leads to power. Now that you've got a purpose, you've got an outcome, you've got action. What if you take action and you notice that it's not working? What happens if you notice something's not working? You're taking action, but it's not getting you closer to your outcome or your end result. What's the obvious first step? The obvious first step is to change your approach. What if you're doing this and it's not working? Then change it. Now, if you change your approach and it's still not working, what would you do then? What would you do? You change again. What if you tried that and that didn't work? What do you do now? You change it. What if you did that and that didn't work? You change that. And what if you did that and that didn't work? You change that too. How many times do you change your approach? Until you find out what works. When you do, keep doing that. Don't be the type to say, oh, no, I've tried this billions of times and I can't get it to work. Really? Billions? Okay, maybe I've tried thousands of times. Really? Thousands? Okay, not thousands, hundreds. Okay, name them. Name those hundreds of times. Okay, I've tried dozens of times. Okay, name them. Okay, I've tried doing the same thing twice. That's more like it. Now you're being realistic. Let me ask you, if you had a baby, how many times would you let it try to get up and walk? You know, before you shut them down and didn't want it to try anymore. What, are you crazy, John? My kids are going to keep walking and they're going to keep trying until they get up and walk. That's right. They'll keep trying until they get up and walk. Then why should it be any different for you? Why do you give up on your outcome after your first or second or even your third falls? Persistence is the key to getting up, brushing yourself off and trying time and time and time again until you can walk, until you can reach your outcome. You know, because Thomas Edison knew his outcome, we no longer have to live with candles, you know, as our only source of light. Do you think Thomas Edison knew his outcome? You think he took persistent action? Sylvester Stallone got rejected by over 15,000 agents in New York before one said yes to his Rocky movie. Walt Disney went bankrupt 7 times before he built Disneyland. Colonel Sanders was over 65 years old, had 11 secret herbs and spices as his only asset. He lived in his car for 2 years before someone gave him a chance. And now the world has KFC, unfortunately. So there's always a way if you're committed. You just got to keep changing your approach. So these 4 guys, Thomas Edison, Sylvester Stallone, Colonel Sanders, Walt Disney, they all knew their outcome. They took massive action. They refined their approach. And they didn't get the result. They never gave up. They just persisted until they got what they saw in their mind's eye. Can you imagine what you can achieve if you model yourself around any of these 4 guys? Can you imagine what your life would be like if you had a definite purpose and never gave up, never gave in until you can see in your mind, out there in the physical world, what you saw in your mind? You can do it because a better world starts with a better you. And I'll see you at the top.